Audio Cassette 2, Side B. Practice Listening Subtest, Paper 3. This is a practice listening test that resembles the IELTS listening test. It is a test to see how well you understand spoken English. You will hear several different recordings and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. The test is divided into 4 sections. There will be time for you to read the instructions and you will have a chance to check your work. You will hear each recording once only. At the end of the real IELTS listening subtest, you will have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. Now turn to Section 1 to begin the test. Listening Section 1. In a moment, you are going to hear a conversation between 2 university students, Vincent and Serena. They are meeting on their university campus. Before you listen, look at questions 1 to 5. As you listen to the first part of the conversation, answer questions 1 to 5.
Hi, Vincent. How are you?
Hello there, Serena. I'm well, thank you. I haven't seen you for ages. How have you been?
Good, thanks. I see you've just walked out of the Life Sciences building. You're not taking classes in biology or something, are you? I thought you were studying sociology.
I am studying sociology, Serena. I was just visiting a friend of mine who's doing research in biochemistry. Actually, I'm on my way to lunch, and then I've got a lecture.
Oh, well, look, I was just going to have a bite to eat as well. Shall we have something together?
That would be great.
The problem with this campus is that the town's so far away, which is where I prefer to eat. It seems like all the students are forced to eat here on campus.
Yeah, but there are quite a few places to choose from here. What if we go to the Student Union cafeteria? I go there sometimes. At least it's cheap.
Yes, the Union cafeteria is cheap, Vincent, but you get what you pay for. That's one place I try to avoid as much as possible. I only go there when I'm low on money or when they have live music. Besides, it's too crowded around lunchtime and...
All right, I know. How about the Aztec Grill? Do you know that one? It's on the 3rd floor of the Arts Centre.
The Aztec Grill, huh? I think I've seen it, but I've never been there. Doesn't it specialise in Mexican food or something?
Yes, it's pretty spicy. Do you like spicy food?
Actually, I love spicy things, but I shouldn't be eating them at the moment. I just got over a stomach flu, so I prefer something mild.
I haven't got a problem with that. I guess I better let you pick a place then. Where would you like to go?
How about the Luxor Cafe?
The Luxor Cafe. You know, I've been on campus for over 2 years and I don't think I've ever heard of it. Where is it?
It's in the garden, behind the horticulture annex.
The horticulture annex. That's in the northwest part of campus, isn't it?
No, it's south of the observatory.
So it's near the football field then, behind Car Park C?
Not quite that far south. It's west of the law library.
Oh, right. I think I know where that is. It's not very far at all. Let's go.
Later, Vincent and Serena sit in the Luxor Cafe, deciding what to eat. Now look at questions 6 to 11. One example has been done for you. As the conversation continues, answer questions 6 to 11.
Well, the menu's quite extensive, isn't it? I feel I could spend hours deciding what to order.
Yes, I know what you mean. I think I'll have a salad to start with.
But there are so many salads to choose from.
Yeah, but I know what I like. I'll order the Greek salad.
If you know this place so well, I'd better follow your example. I'll have a Greek salad too.
Hey, wait a sec. If you order a different kind, we can share and have a greater variety.
All right, that sounds good to me. How about if I have a seafood salad then?
Good choice. They use fresh ingredients here, so you won't be disappointed. I'm quite hungry, so I'll have a sandwich too. A chicken sandwich.
I think I'll have some soup. Is the onion soup any good?
I don't know. I've never ordered it. It's not my favourite soup, to be honest. Why don't you try the tomato soup? I've had it here lots of times.
No, I think I'll stick with the onion. And I think I'll have a sandwich as well. You reckon the chicken's good, eh?
If you like chicken sandwiches, yes. The roast beef's quite tasty too.
No, I'll go with the chicken.
That's a lot of food you're ordering, Vincent. Are you sure you can get through all that?
Not a problem. I could eat a horse. Shall we order now? Oh, we still have to choose something to drink.
I'll have lemon tea. They say lemon tea's good for the stomach, which is what I need.
I'll have mineral water myself.
After eating, Vincent and Serena leave the cafe.
Well, it was nice having lunch with you, Vincent.
Yes. Have you got time to meet for lunch again next week, perhaps?
I don't see why not. Tuesdays and Fridays are bad for me, though. I've got tutorials and labs around lunchtime on those days. But I'm on campus every day, so...
I've got the same problem on Tuesdays, Thursdays and Fridays. I guess that leaves us with Monday or Wednesday.
Let's make it Monday. Why don't we meet here at the Luxor Cafe, say around 1:15?
You wouldn't want to make it a bit earlier, would you? Like 12:30 or 12:45? It would be better for me.
Well, I finish a lecture at 12:15, and I usually stick around to talk to the lecturer. But I guess 1:45 would be all right.
Good. Then it's settled. I'll see you then.
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Listening section 2. In a moment, you are going to hear a talk given by Mr. Alf Mearsham, who works as a real estate agent in the city of Chapmanville. He is speaking to a group of newcomers about the city and rental accommodation to be found there. Before you listen, look at questions 12 to 22. Note the examples that have been done for you. As you listen to the talk, answer questions 12 to 22.
Hi, I'm Alf Mearsham. I'm the rental manager for the Central Chapmanville Real Estate Agency. I'm a real estate agent much like any other, in that I help people buy and sell houses. But about half my time is spent working to assist people in renting houses and flats. I've been in this business for 12 years now, and I know this city very well in terms of which areas are the better places to live and how much it costs to rent in these areas. Now, I normally divide Chapmanville into 3 areas in terms of rental prices. Generally speaking, the area in the north of the city is the low end of the spectrum, the cheapest housing. So, if you're looking to spend as little as possible on rent, I suggest you look there. The most expensive area would be the eastern part of Chapmanville. Most people think it's the prettiest part of the metropolitan area because of all the hills and parks, and because so many people desire to live there, housing prices tend to be quite high. The middle market, in terms of prices for accommodation, is found in the city's western and southern areas. Now, let me give you some examples of how much it will cost you to rent in these areas. Let's imagine you're a single person looking for a one-bedroom flat. In eastern Chapmanville, you would be paying no less than $650 a month for such a flat. You won't find anything for less than that. But a lot of people pay as much as $1,100 per month or more. The higher-priced flats are usually the ones in the hills, which run through the east. They've got the best views of the city. A similarly sized flat in the west of the city, and in the south too for that matter, would cost you at most about $650 a month. But there are many flats going for less, and if you look around a bit, you can find one for as little as $350. That's quite a reasonable rental price for most people. If you still find that too expensive, I suggest you head to Chapmanville's north, where the cheapest flats are to be found. One-bedroom flats there start from about $170 a month up to about $400. Now, for those of you who want something bigger, you'll have to be prepared to pay about double those prices for a small 2- or 3-bedroom house. That goes for any of the areas I mentioned. Okay, so much for prices. What are the advantages and disadvantages of these areas? Well, I told you that the eastern part of Chapmanville is the prettiest. There are lots of parks and lots of trees all around, and you've got the beautiful hills right there. In the south, you've also got the river, but you won't find too many parks there because of all the factories alongside the river. In fact, there's quite a bit of industry in the south, which makes it a less desirable place to live. Still, the south is convenient because of public transport. The south has very good train services to the city centre, as well as buses, and that's why a lot of people choose to live there. I said earlier that the western and southern parts of Chapmanville are about the same in terms of the price you pay for accommodation. They also have the same sort of public transport services, but the two areas are quite different in other ways. The west is next to the bay, so it's quite attractive in that sense, but there are a couple of problems with the west. One is that the bay is polluted, so polluted in fact that you wouldn't want to swim there. I used to take my family there about 10 years ago, but now I wouldn't go near it. The other disadvantage of the west is that that's where the airport is, the Chapmanville International Airport. The noise can be quite annoying. Lastly, the north. In northern Chapmanville, as I said before, housing is cheap, quite cheap in fact, but you pay in other ways. For example, the area is very low and is made up entirely of wetlands. It's beautiful in a way, but it attracts an incredible amount of insects for most of the year. The mosquitoes there are really bad. This makes things quite unpleasant, and so few people have any real wish to live there. But if money's a problem, that's the place to go. Just bring your insect repellent. Oh, I should mention that the only public transport in the north is buses. There aren't any trains, so it's not all that convenient as you can imagine. Actually, eastern Chapmanville is in the same situation in terms of public transport, even though it's a richer part of the city. Don't ask me why that is, though. Let me just finish by again welcoming you all to Chapmanville and wishing you good luck in finding accommodation and settling down in whichever part of the city suits you best.
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Listening Section 3. In a moment, you are going to hear a conversation between three students, Wanda, Jack, and Annette. They are reviewing their lecture notes after hearing a lecture on the subject of bottle recycling. Before you listen, look at questions 23 to 32. Note the example that has been done for you. As you listen to the conversation, answer questions 23 to 32.
Hello, Wanda. Hello, Annette. I had trouble getting out of bed this morning, so I came to class a bit late. I got to the lecture theatre about 30 minutes after Professor Johnson began her lecture. Do you mind telling me what I missed?
Not at all, Jack. Actually, you didn't miss more than 15 minutes, because Professor Johnson arrived a bit late herself.
Which is pretty typical for her, isn't it?
It sure is. Let's see. How do your notes begin, Jack?
Well, when I came in, she was talking about recycling of cans and the differences between can and bottle recycling.
Right, okay. Well, before that, she explained a little about glass bottle recycling. She said that glass recycling is still far more efficient than recycling other materials. That's because there's no loss of quality, no matter how many times the glass is recycled.
That's interesting.
She also talked about the tiny little pieces of glass you get when you break up bottles in the recycling process. What's that called again, Annette?
It's called cullet. It's spelt C-U-L-L-E-T.
Yes, that's right. The professor said that there are bottle factories in some parts of the world, like Japan and the US, that make their bottles entirely from cullet.
So they don't use new glass?
That's right.
What about bottle factories elsewhere?
Let me just check my notes. The bottles made in most places contain about 3/4 new glass, and the rest is recycled.
I guess recycling is better for the environment than just throwing things away and using new materials all the time. But wouldn't it be even better to reuse the same bottles without breaking them up into colours?
Yeah, Professor Johnson talked about that too. She said if you reuse bottles, you save on energy and resource costs. She said that in parts of Britain, beer bottles are still reused rather than recycled. But she said that reusable bottles have to be built stronger than the kinds of bottles that are recycled after they're used only once.
But then they last forever, don't they?
Actually, no. Reusable bottles can be cleaned and refilled a maximum of 30 times, and then they become too weak to use again. They're crushed and recycled.
But it still sounds better than just recycling. My parents tell me that when they were children, a lot more things came in reusable bottles and jars. It really seems like we've moved away from reusing, doesn't it? Did Professor Johnson talk about why that's so?
Well, she discussed why it's so difficult to maintain a system of returning and reusing bottles.
What reasons did she mention?
Well, a few things. One factor is that there's an increasing variety of bottle types on the market. You know, when you walk into a supermarket, you see virtually hundreds of different types of drinks, and each one has its own bottle shape and colour. In other words, there is virtually no standardization, and standardization is necessary to keep a bottle reusing system going. It gets too complicated and expensive to have a separate scheme for each bottle type.
That makes sense. So we're paying for the variety of bottles by having to recycle them rather than reuse them.
I guess that's right. But that's not the only problem. Apparently, shopkeepers are another obstacle. They don't want to have to collect all the returned bottles. Shopkeepers claim they can't afford the time it takes and that it's not their responsibility anyway.
I suppose I can see their point, in a way, but in terms of the environment, it's not a very caring attitude, is it?
No, but things may be changing. Professor Johnson said that governments are beginning to realise the need to cut down on wastes. So some places are making laws that require everyone to return their bottles for reuse. It's happening in Denmark and in parts of Canada. In those countries, a person who buys something in a bottle, like a soft drink, is responsible for returning the bottle once they've finished with it. If they don't, they're breaking the law. Also, bottle makers aren't allowed to make bottles that cannot be reused.
That's encouraging. Anything else?
Well, she then talked about plastic bottles. She said that it's still better environmentally to buy things packaged in glass bottles because recycling them is more efficient. But there are relatively recent programs for recycling plastics, and recycling plastics has its advantages.
Such as?
She said that recycling of plastics uses 1/10 the energy of creating new plastic.
Only 1/10 of the energy, did you say? Wow. So recycling plastics has its benefits too.
Finally, she said that we should also look at other factors about bottle use too, like transportation. Obviously, there's an environmental cost in transporting bottles to and from factories and shops. She said plastics are better than glass in this respect because they're lighter. For glass, 1 tonne is about 2,000 average bottles. For plastic, it's 10 times that. That's 20,000 bottles per tonne.
That's quite a difference, isn't it? Maybe plastic is the way to go, after all.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Listening section 4. In a moment, you are going to hear a talk about stress and its effects. The talk is being given by a psychologist, Dr. Fiona Williams. Before you listen, look at questions 33 to 36. As you listen to the first part of the talk, answer questions 33 to 36.
We're here today to talk a little about stress. That is, mental or emotional stress. It's something we can't entirely avoid, and yet we need to be aware of its effects on us when it builds up to dangerous levels. Stress is quite usual among university students. Of course, you know the more obvious sources of stress. A deadline for an essay or a project, for example, can certainly be a source, especially as the day gets near. Also, the feeling you might have when you have to speak to many people at once. That can bring on stress as well. But there are other, less obvious reasons too. Stress can come when you're listening to a lecture and trying to keep up with the lecturer's words as you take notes. In fact, you might be feeling stress as you're listening to me right now. Another stressful situation for the university student is waiting for results. After you hand in your paper, for example, you have to wait a while before you know how you've done, and that period of time can be very difficult. One more source of stress is burnout, the feeling you get from working too long and too hard at your assignments. Burnout happens on the job and at school especially. It's also important to remember that not all the stress you may be feeling has to do with your studies. In fact, there are plenty more sources of stress in our day-to-day lives, things to do with family or work, for example.
Now look at questions 37 to 39. One example has been done for you. As the talk continues, answer questions 37 to 39.
But perhaps the most stressful things of all are major life events. When somebody you know dies, that's a big one. Or, more happily, when you're having a baby. That causes a lot of stress too. Now, in 1969, a psychologist by the name of Thomas Holmes came up with what he called a life event stress index. Now, how this stress index works is like this. For every important event in your life, there is a number, a score if you like. The higher the score, the more stressful the event. The highest number is 100, which represents the most stressful experience you can have. Do you understand so far? Now, Holmes divided these events into 3 categories depending on their score. Events scoring under 35 points he called moderately stressful. Events between 35 and 65 he labeled highly stressful. And everything scoring above that was called extremely stressful. Okay. Let me read you a few of these so you understand what I'm talking about. Getting married gets a score of 51. That's considered quite stressful, especially when you consider the change this brings to your life. It's not as stressful, though, as when you get a divorce. That's 73. How about when you get pregnant? That's worth 40 points according to the index. When you finish school, you score 26 points. That's exactly the same score, the same stress level, as when your husband or wife leaves his or her job.
Now look at questions 40 to 43. As the talk continues, answer questions 40 to 43.
Let me read you a few more examples from the stress index. If you move to a new house or flat, the score is 20. You get 45 points if you retire. That's 2 points less than if you get fired from your job. On the other hand, if you find yourself arguing with your mother-in-law, the stress rating is 29 points. How about going on a holiday? When you think about it, a vacation can create stress too. It gets 13 points. Now, I'll stop with the scores for a moment. Next, I want to look at what these numbers actually mean. You're supposed to add up the numbers for events that took place within the last 12 months only. The total is supposed to tell us something about how likely we are to get sick, to become ill from the level of stress. How do we know when we're under a lot of stress? There are many signs, but I'll just mention a few. One is communicating less with friends and family, or at work or school. You may not feel like talking to people so much. When the phone rings, you hope it isn't for you. You just don't want to have to deal with other people and their problems. But humans are naturally social animals, and when there is a constant desire to be left alone, there is something wrong, and it's usually a sign of stress. A second indication is feeling less energy when you wouldn't normally feel tired. You may be eating well, or not even studying or working very hard, but you still feel you have very little energy. Like you want to sleep all the time. That's probably stress. When we have trouble sleeping, this too usually means the problem is stress. It might take you a long time to fall asleep, or you may wake up in the middle of the night and not be able to fall asleep again. A person like this is more likely to fall asleep while watching television than in bed.
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers.